clear water, looking down at fish gliding smoothly through the turquoise that seems almost luminous, with a waterfall crashing into the lake directly in front of you, and another one just visible beyond that, and then another after that. Croatia's Plitvice Lakes National Park is a system of 16 interconnected lakes, all sitting at different elevations and all flowing into each other through hundreds of waterfalls and cascades. The water drops a total of around 133 meters from the highest lake to the lowest, which means the entire park is essentially a series of steps, each one holding a lake that spills over the edge into the next. Wooden boardwalks run along the water's edge and sometimes directly across it, so you're walking just inches above the surface while the whole system moves underneath you. The color of the water is what people can't get their heads around. It shifts constantly, lake to lake, hour to hour, angle to angle. One moment it's a deep emerald, then the light changes and it goes turquoise. In the canyon sections, it turns a rich electric blue. Well, the reason is a combination of dissolved minerals in the water, the sunlight penetrating to the bottom, and microscopic organisms living in the lake. But here's the part that makes the place even stranger. The lakes are literally being built in real time. The natural dams that separate the lakes are made of a soft limestone called travertine, which is being deposited by the water right now, continuously, at a rate of roughly a centimeter per year. Mosses, algae, and dead organic matter get coated in calcium carbonate, and slowly they solidify. That means these waterfalls are always changing. Every decade, Plitvice looks slightly different, and some barriers have risen above others, causing lakes to merge. Others have split what used to be one lake into two, and the park was inscribed a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979, partly because of that, not just for how it looks, but because it's one of the best examples on Earth of an active, living process that visitors can actually see happening. The largest waterfall in the park drops about 78 meters, making it the tallest waterfall in Croatia. The park covers about 300 square kilometers, and it supports brown bears, wolves, lynx living in the surrounding forests, and of course swimming has been banned since the 1970s to protect the travertine. The only way through the park is on foot, by boat across the largest lake, or through a shuttle bus. But even then, you keep stopping, because the view around each corner seems impossible to believe until you've already seen 20 of them. Number 9. Fingal's Cave in Scotland. Walk into Fingal's Cave, and the first thing that hits you isn't the visuals, it's the sound. The Atlantic Ocean pours into the cave mouth, and the way the arch ceiling and the columns funnel it in, the sound that comes back is not the crash of surf, it's something more like a deep resonant hum, the kind that fills the space and vibrates in your chest. The ancient Gaelic name for this place, which I'm going to butcher, was Limabin. It means the Cave of Melody, which tells you that the people have been listening to this cave for a very long time. The cave sits on the uninhabited island of Staffa in Scotland's Inner Hebrides, and what makes it look unlike any other cave on Earth is what it's made of. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything is built from hexagonal columns of basalt, stacked together so precisely that the cave looks less like something carved by nature and more like something assembled by an architect. These columns are roughly six-sided, mostly true hexagons, running about 20 meters tall. Standing inside and looking at the walls, the overwhelming impression is that they were cut and placed there deliberately. They were not. Here's what actually happened. Around 60 million years ago, during an era of volcanic activity along what is now the North Atlantic, a massive lava flow spread across this region. As that molten rock cooled, it contracted, and when basalt cools and contracts under the right conditions, it fractures in a predictable pattern, the same hexagonal geometry you see in dried mud. The cracks spread perpendicular to the cooling surface, and as they deepened, they created these long, perfectly even columns. Then, over millions of years, the sea carved into the rock, exposing the columns, cutting the cave, and polishing the surfaces with salt water until the whole interior looked like it had been designed. That same lava flow created what's known as the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, directly across the water. The ancient legend connecting them was that an Irish giant built a causeway of this hexagonal stone across the sea, so he could walk from Scotland for a fight, of course. In geologic terms, the legend is almost correct. Both formations really do come from the same single lava event on opposite sides of the same stretch of ocean. The cave's about 70 meters deep, and the roof arches to around 20 meters at the entrance. The sea fills the bottom, so access on foot is along a narrow ledge of columns just above the waterline. Felix Mendelssohn visited in 1829 and was so affected by the acoustics here that he sent a musical phrase to his sister on a postcard, describing it as what the cave put in his head. The postcard became the basis for his Hebrides Overture. Queen Victoria visited, Jules Verne visited, and Walter Scott wrote that the cave exceeded every description he had heard of it. This cave has been pulling in artists, composers, writers, and scientists for centuries, and the sound it makes when the Atlantic comes in has never changed. Number 8. The Hitachi Seaside Park in Japan. Every spring, for about 2 weeks, one hill in Japan turns completely blue. Not partly blue, not blue in a nice way, completely, overwhelmingly, all-encompassingly blue. So much of it spread so evenly across every surface of the hill that standing at the bottom and looking up, it becomes genuinely difficult to tell where the hill ends and the sky begins. Hitachi Seaside Park. It sits in Ibaraki Prefecture, northeast of Tokyo on the Pacific coast. The park is large, around 350 acres, and it blooms with different flowers across every season. But what people come from all over the world for is what happens on Murarashi Hill between roughly mid-April and early May. During that window, approximately 5 million Nemophila flowers bloom simultaneously across the hill on this sloped ground. Each individual flower is tiny, small and round, with 5 pale blue petals. But when 5 million of them open at once on a hillside, the effect is something that cameras have difficulty doing justice to. The Nemophila plant is native to North America and is commonly called the baby blue eyes. It's not a difficult plant to grow, which is part of why the park is able to cover an entire hill with it. The flowers are sown every November, carefully protected through the winter under frost-free sheeting, watered and weeded through the cold months, and then they're released into bloom in the spring. The park began this planting program in the early 2000s, and within a few years, images that had gone around the world and online from the park went from a regional attraction to one of the most photographed seasonal destinations in Japan. The timing is the magic and the challenge. The bloom lasts roughly 2 to 3 weeks, and the peak, when coverage is at its fullest, often only holds for about 10 days. Weather here affects everything. A strong wind or a heavy rain can damage the petals across an entire section of the hill overnight. The park tracks the progression carefully and publishes bloom forecasts so visitors can plan around the peak. During the Golden Week, which falls right at the end of the season, the park draws enormous crowds. The image people come to capture, the entire hill blue, merging seamlessly with the sky over the Pacific behind it, depends entirely on catching a calm, sunny day in the right 10-day window. The park does also transform in other seasons. In autumn, a plant called kochia turns the same hill a deep burning red. In summer, huge beds of zinnia fill the other areas, but the Nemophila is what the park is known for, and for good reason. There's no filter, there's no trick of the camera, and no enhancement needed. You just stand on the hill in late April with 5 million blue flowers moving in the coastal breeze around you, and the world just looks like that. Moving on to number 7, the Eisreisenwelt, Austria. Most people's mental image of a cave involves dark rock, dripping water, stalactites, maybe the smell of fresh earth. Eisreisenwelt is none of those things. It's ice, frozen waterfalls, ice formations, narrow corridors of glaciated stone. This is a world of cold and stillness inside a mountain in the Austrian Alps that looks like it was built by a civilization that lived underground and worked in frozen water instead of stone. Eisreisenwelt translates from German as the world of the ice giants, which is a great name, and the name holds up. The cave system extends more than 42 kilometers into a mountain near the town of Wöfen, about 40 kilometers south of Salzburg. It is technically the largest ice cave in the world. Around 200,000 people visit each year, which sounds like a lot until you consider that almost none of them have ever heard of it. For its size and strangeness, Eisreisenwelt is remarkably unknown. Now, the cave was officially discovered by a naturalist named Anton Posselt in 1879, though local people in Wöfen had known about it for much longer. They believed it to be the entrance to hell, which is a reasonable thing to think when you approach a vast mountain opening in the Alps that breathes out freezing air and disappears into darkness. Posselt got 200 meters inside before turning back. A speleologist named Alexander von Murk explored it more seriously beginning in 1912, mapping the passages over several expeditions. He loved the cave so much that he requested his ashes be placed inside it when he died. He was killed in World War I 2 years later, and his ashes are still there, in a niche in the cave wall. Now, the ice inside this cave is not glacial, ancient ice. It formed over the last several thousand years through specific tricks of airflow. Cold winter air flows into the cave through its open entrances, and it freezes any water that has seeped inside. In summer, the direction of the airflow reverses, so the cold air from deep inside the cave will blow outwards towards the entrance, and that's actually protecting the ice from melting. Visitors are given carbide gas lanterns at the entrance. There's no electric lighting installed in the cave, and when the guide swings the large door open to let you in, the wind that comes across can hit speeds of up to 100 kilometers an hour. It's not subtle in there. Inside, the lanterns throw flickering light across these formations, frozen cascades that have built up over the centuries, walls sheeted in clear ice, and formations that look like sleeping figures or organ pipes. One of the largest formations rises up 25 meters, and the tour covers about a kilometer into the cave, and it takes roughly 75 minutes. Even in the middle of summer, the temperatures inside there stay near freezing, which means you're going to need a jacket in July and gloves in August. The mountain outside might be warm and green, but inside, it's another world entirely. Number 6. Vale de Lua, Brazil. There's a valley in central Brazil that looks like the surface of the moon, not in a vague, poetic way, in a very literal way. Rounded craters, smooth, curved depressions, pot-like hollows, gray-black rock, worn to a near polish, and silence. If you showed a photograph of Vale de Lua without any context and asked someone where it was, a river valley in the Brazilian highlands would not be the first answer. Vale de Lua, which translates to Valley of the Moon, sits near the Chapada dos Veadeiros National Park in the state of Goiás in the Brazil Central Plateau. Getting there requires a flight to Brasilia, a drive of a few hours and a short stretch of dirt road and a walk through the Cerrado. This is a vast savanna that covers this part of Brazil. The valley itself isn't big. It's not a dramatic canyon or a sweeping plain or anything. It's just a section of river corridor where the São Miguel River has done something extraordinary to the rock. The rocks here are part of a formation dating back between 1.3 and 1.6 billion years ago. They are among the oldest exposed rock formations in Brazil and are among the oldest on the continent. For all of that time, the river has been flowing across it, not in a straight line, not smoothly. The river will swirl in eddies and irregular surges, carrying and fine debris with it, and all of that material has been grinding against the rock surface year after year, billion after billion. The result is what you see there. Smooth, rounded craters worn into the stone, pot-like depressions that spin the water in circles and bore themselves deeper. Long, curved channels that sweep through the rock like something poured rather than carved. There's no sharp edges here, no rough surfaces, just smooth, flowing gray-black stone, shaped into forms that look organic rather than geologic. The rock itself is rich in quartz crystal, and on a bright day, sunlight passing through the water in the pools refracts and scatters in ways that make the shallow sections glow. But the valley closes immediately when rain is coming, because the São Miguel can flood fast and violently with very little warning. What looks like a peaceful lunar landscape will turn into a rushing torrent when conditions change. Vale de Lua remains relatively unknown outside Brazil, which means it hasn't yet been managed for mass tourism, the way that many of the world's visual spectacles have been. The surrounding area is reportedly visible from space due to the high quartz concentration in the rock. The valley itself sits quietly beneath all of that, doing what it's been doing for over 1 billion years, just letting the river work on the stone, one grain of sand at a time. Number 5. Goblin Valley in the United States. There's a valley in the Utah desert where thousands of alien creatures are standing still, watching you. Well, that's what it feels like the first time you walk into Goblin Valley State Park. Everywhere you look, in every direction, as far as you can see, there are these rounded, mushroom-shaped rock figures standing on the desert floor. Some are knee-high, some are taller than a person, some look vaguely like faces, some look like they're mid-stride, frozen in place, but all of them are made of sandstone. All of them are real, and the whole valley floor is so densely packed with them that walking through it feels less like a hike and more like navigating a crowd. This valley sits in central Utah in the San Rafael Desert, and it's remote enough that most people who live in the U.S. has never heard of it. It became a state park in 1964, but the formation itself goes back considerably further. The rocks that make up the goblins are called Entrada sandstone, and they were laid down around 170 million years ago during the Jurassic period, when this part of Utah sat beside a shallow ancient sea. What created the goblins is a process called differential erosion, and it is elegantly simple once you understand it. Water and wind will attack the rock along its weakest points. The Entrada sandstone's not uniform. It's got natural joints and fractures that run through it, lines of weakness where the rock is more vulnerable. Water will seep into those cracks, and then freeze-thaw cycles slowly wedge them apart, and rain and wind grind away the softer sections faster than the hard ones. Over millions of years, the result is a rounded, bulbous shape, wider at the top where hard rock resists and narrower at the base where the softer rock is worn away. The valley's only about a mile wide and maybe 2 miles long, but what makes it extraordinary is not its size but the density here. Most places where hoodoos form, they appear in clusters along the cliff edge. Goblin Valley's got them packed across the entire floor in numbers that are difficult to comprehend until you're standing in the middle of it. The sense of being surrounded is immediate and complete. But what makes it even stranger is that you can walk among them freely. There are designated trails, but much of the valley floor is just open for exploration. You can wander between the formations, duck behind them, look at them from below, and the physical access is rare at geological formations of this scale. It's one thing to see these goblins from an overlook. It's something else entirely to be at ground level with them, in among them, with the desert silence and the red rock landscape stretching out in every direction. The valley was discovered by cowboys searching for stray cattle in the early 20th century. The man who first properly explored and photographed it, Arthur Chaffin, initially called it Mushroom Valley, which is arguably more accurate than the one that stuck. A Hollywood film crew then used it as an alien planet in the 1990 film Galaxy Quest, for reasons that are immediately obvious to anyone who's been there. These rock formations are eroding at roughly 2 to 4 feet per century, which means the goblins you're going to see today are almost identical to how they looked 1,000 years ago, and will look much the same thing 1,000 years from now. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. They're just standing there in the Utah desert, looking like something that shouldn't exist. Number 4, Tianmen Mountain, China. Alright, here's the setup. A road with 99 hairpin turns spiral up a mountainside from 200 meters above sea level to 1,300 meters, coiling through the clouds so tightly it looks like from above a pale ribbon stitched into a dark green rock. At the top of that road, you climb 999 steps to reach a natural arch 130 meters tall, roughly the height of a 40-story building, punched clean through the solid body of a mountain. And if that's not enough, you can walk out onto a glass-floored path bolted to the cliff face more than a kilometer above the valley floor. This is Tianmen Mountain in China's Hunan province, and every single element of that description is real and factual. The mountain itself rises to about 1,500 meters, and it's been the site of spiritual significance in China for well over 1,000 years. A Buddhist temple sits at the summit, which was originally built during the Tang Dynasty about 1,300 years ago, and the mountain has long been associated with Chinese culture. The name Tianmen translates to Heaven's Gate, which when you see this place, that's what it looks like. It's hard to argue with. The arch, Tianmen Cave, is the central feature and arguably one of the most dramatic natural formations on Earth. It formed through erosion, the same process that dissolves limestone over millions of years. In this case, historical records note that the cave's current form came into being in the year 263 AD, during the Three Kingdoms period, when the back wall of what used to be an enclosed cave collapsed, opening the arch to the sky. Whether that event is the precise origin is debated, but what's not debated is the result. A 131-meter-tall opening through a mountain, perfectly framing a rectangle of sky at an elevation of around 1,300 meters. The road to reach it, Chongten Avenue, or the Road to Heaven, was itself a feat of engineering. It's just under 11 kilometers long, and it climbs over 1,000 meters in elevation through about 99 precisely numbered bends. From above, these bends look drawn on the mountain rather than built into it. In 2016, a driver completed the ascent in a Ferrari in just over 10 minutes, which is the kind of stunt the road seems to invite. In 1999, 3 aircraft flew through the arch itself, and in 2011, a wingsuit pilot flew through it alone. Then there's the glass skywalk, yeah no thanks, attached to the cliff face at 1,400 meters above sea level. It's a fully transparent glass path bolted directly to the rock. There's no suspension here, no netting, just clear glass panels and the valley floor 1,000 meters below you. Every year, about 1 million people visit. They come on what is claimed to be the longest passenger cable car in the world, 7,400 meters long, that rises 1,300 meters, taking roughly 28 minutes, which travels directly from the city center to the mountain summit. Looking down from the cable car on a clear day, you can see the 99 bends of the road, the arch above, and the valley stretching out in every direction. It is probably one of the more surreal 28 minutes you're likely to spend in your life. Number 3. The Red Beach in Panjin, China. Most beaches are defined by what they're made of: sand, pebbles, maybe shells. Panjin Red Beach is defined by what grows on it, and what grows on it turns the entire coastline the color of blood. Every autumn, for a period of about 6 weeks between late September and mid-October, the wetlands along China's Laohe River Delta transform into one of the most arresting landscapes on Earth. The ground, hundreds of square kilometers of the ground, shift from a green to a deep saturated crimson that's so vivid and so uniform that pictures of it look like they've been edited. They haven't. The color is natural, and it comes from a single plant. That plant is called Soeda salsa. It's a type of seaweed that is one of the few species on Earth capable of thriving in highly alkaline, highly saline soil. Most plants can't tolerate those conditions. Soedas evolved not just to survive, but exploit it, producing a dense, low-growing carpet across tidal mudflats. The plant's life cycle runs across the entire year, then begins pushing up in April and May, emerging as a light pink green through summer. It stays green as it grows and then matures, and then as autumn arrives and the temperatures drop, the plant begins accumulating carotenoid pigments in its tissue. That's the same class of compounds responsible for the orange of a carrot or the red of a tomato. In Soeda, though, those pigments turn the plant a deep, vivid crimson. By late September, when the color peaks, the effect across hundreds of square kilometers of wetland is incomprehensible in scale. Panjin is located in the Liaoning province of northeastern China, and the Red Beach is about 30 kilometers southwest of the city. This wetland covers about 800 square kilometers roughly, but most of it's off-limit to people. The area open to the public includes a long boardwalk running above the marsh, from which the full carpet of color can be seen, and which gives the whole experience a slightly surreal quality, because you're standing above a wetland in northeastern China and looking at something that resembles a flat, perfectly red painting. This area is also a critical habitat for wildlife. Over 260 bird species live in or pass through the wetland, including the endangered red-crowned crane, one of the rarest cranes on Earth. This area has been under state-level protection since 1988, and it sits within a national nature reserve, and alongside the extraordinary visual spectacle it provides, it also functions as a breeding ground and stopover for migratory birds. There is a tension at Panjin worth knowing about. The wetland does also sit alongside one of China's largest oil fields, and the pressures of industrial activity, agricultural runoff, and tourism on such an ecosystem are real and ongoing. The Soeda itself, though, is sensitive to changes in salinity. If the conditions change significantly, the plant retreats. But for now, each autumn, the marsh turns red, and that 6-week window, when it does, Panjin looks like somewhere else entirely. Number 2. Aogashima Island in Japan. There's a small island in the Pacific Ocean, about 300 kilometers south of Tokyo, where approximately 170 people live inside an active volcano. The island is the volcano, the village is inside the crater, and inside that crater there is a second, smaller volcano. This is Aogashima, and it's one of the stranger places on Earth where humans have chosen to make a permanent home. The island is tiny, just about 3.5 kilometers long and about 2.5 wide. It's almost entirely encircled by steep cliffs that drop straight into the Pacific with no beach and no gentle slope. From above it looks like a fortress rising up from the ocean, a dark, heavily vegetated mass of volcanic rock. The outer rim of the island itself, the wall of a caldera, the collapsed remains of an ancient volcano, and inside that outer wall sits a second, smaller caldera with its own central cone called Murayama, still rising up from the floor. It's basically a volcano inside a volcano. Most of the village sits in the sheltered depression between the inner and outer caldera walls, partly because it's the flattest available ground, and partly because those walls do provide some protection from the Pacific wind and weather that batter the exterior. Looking at the island from photographs, it's almost impossible to believe that people live there. It looks way less like a habitable landmass and more like something that just washed up from the bottom of the ocean. Aogashima formed from the overlapping remnants of at least 4 calderas, erupting and building over each other across hundreds of thousands of years until the island broke the surface. The volcanic soil that resulted is extraordinarily fertile. The surrounding waters are rich with fish, and the island has a natural freshwater spring, which is a rare combination for a volcanic island of this size. It's probably the primary reason people ever settled there in the first place. But here's where the part of the story makes Aogashima feel something like from a novel. On April 18, 1785, after a period of earthquake swarms and steadily increasing volcanic activity, the island erupted with enough force to kill between 130 and 140 of its 327 residents. The eruption had been building for years, and records from the nearby island noted tremors as early as 1780, and steam rising from the lakes in the inner caldera. By 1781, there were eruptions. Then, in 1783, lava flows began inside the crater, destroying homes and forcing evacuations. Those who could reach boats fled to Hachijima, and roughly half the population didn't make it. The island was left completely uninhabited for about 50 years. Not because no one wanted to return, some of the survivors never stopped wanting to go back, but because the Japanese authorities of the time repeatedly refused to allow resettlement of an active volcano. It took the persistent years-long campaign of one man, a survivor named Jirozeman Sasahara, to eventually secure permission. He documented the island, argued its case, and in 1835, roughly a decade after gaining approval, the first resettlement party made the crossing. People came back to an island that had killed half of them, and then they stayed. Today, though, the population's around 170. It is the smallest municipality in all of Japan. About 70 of those residents are temporary government workers, like teachers, police officers, and administrative staff. They transferred in for short postings from the mainland. The rest are permanent residents, people who were born there, or who came and chose not to leave, or whose families had been on the island for generations. So what's life actually like there? Well, there's a store on the island, a few small guest houses. There's 3 bars, of course, it being Japan, the single school that houses the elementary, middle, and high school students together under one roof. Sometimes they have class sizes of just 1 or 2 students. Medical emergencies do require helicopter evacuation to Hachijima or beyond. Getting on or off the island does also mean that either a helicopter or ferry's got to get you there, but the ferry has a roughly 60% cancellation rate. In bad stretches, though, the island can be effectively cut off for weeks at a time, and supply shipments arrive by sea when the conditions allow. And yet, the island is not without its pleasures. The geothermal activity that make the ground dangerous make it useful. There's a sauna powered entirely by volcanic heat from the vents in the crater floor, where residents and the occasional visitor can sit in volcanic steam and cook food using the same heat source. Pots provided, sweet potatoes and eggs available from the store. The landscape of the inner caldera, green, sheltered, enclosed by volcanic walls. It's unlike anything else in the country. The island inspired the fictional Japanese landscape in the anime Your Name, which gives you some sense of how otherworldly it looks even to people who grew up in Japan. But the last eruption was in 1785, which sounds like a long time ago, and by human standards it is, but geologically, 240 years is nothing. The volcanic vents are still steaming and the ground is still warm, and no one on the island is pretending otherwise. They know what happened in 1785. They know the numbers. They live beside the thing that killed half their ancestors. And they made a choice about that, not out of ignorance, but something more complicated. Maybe a combination of belonging, stubbornness, and a genuine appreciation for life that the rest of Japan, with its cities and high-speed trains and 13 million person capital, can't offer. Number 1. Kawah Ijen, Indonesia. Every volcano on Earth glows red or orange at night. Kawah Ijen, it glows blue. Not the faint blue, not a subtle atmospheric blue, a vivid electric neon blue. The kind that looks completely wrong for a volcano, and every photograph of it has been accused at some point of being digitally enhanced. The blue fire of Kawah Ijen is one of the most extreme phenomena on the planet, and it's happening on the island of Java in Indonesia on any given night when the conditions are right. To understand what you're actually looking at requires setting aside the word lava, because although the blue rivers flowing down the mountainside at night look exactly like lava, the same slow, deliberate movement and the same branching channels, they're not molten rock. They are burning sulfur, and that distinction matters because it's the reason they're blue rather than red. Kawah Ijen sits within a volcanic complex in East Java that's among the most sulfur-rich environments anywhere on the planet. This volcano has been geologically active for around 300,000 years, and at its summit is a crater containing the world's largest acid lake, over a kilometer wide, 200 meters deep, and filled with water so thoroughly saturated with dissolved volcanic gas that its hydrochloric acid content gives it a pH that really gets close to 0. For context, battery acid has a pH of around 1. This lake is more corrosive than that. The water is a vivid blue-green color, which sounds beautiful until you understand that the color comes from the concentration in the water. A metal object left in the lake would not last long. Around the crater's edges, sulfuric gases are constantly escaping from cracks, hot vents in the rock. The temperatures at these vents can reach 600 degrees Celsius. When those gases hit the open air and encounter oxygen, they ignite. And sulfur, when it burns blue. Now, that's not a quirk of temperature, that's just chemistry. Sulfur combustion produces a blue-violet flame that is fundamentally different from the red-orange glow of burning carbon or iron. This happens constantly, day and night, around the clock, but here's the thing, during the day you can't see any of it. Daylight completely overwhelms the color of the flames. The volcano looks volcanic. It's dramatic, it's steaming, it's impressive in its own right, but nothing unusual. The blue fire only reveals itself at dark, which means anyone who wants to witness what Kawa-i-gen actually looks like has to hike to the crater rim in the middle of the night, hours before dawn, wearing a gas mask against the toxic sulfur dioxide. That hike to the rim takes about 2 hours from the trailhead, then a 45-minute descent into the crater, and the whole thing is done in darkness by headlamp on a volcanic trail with gas that periodically rolls in and reduces visibility to almost nothing. Thousands of people make that hike every year. The experience is constantly described as one of the most disorienting and arresting things a person can encounter in the natural world. After several nights in the crater, the French photographer Olivier Grunwald, who spent years documenting this phenomenon, said that he and his colleagues genuinely felt like they were on another planet. That kind of description keeps coming up from everyone who goes there. It's not a metaphor so much as a straightforward description of the perceptual experience. But there is a layer to Kawa-i-gen that no account of it can honestly leave out. The crater is an active sulfur mine. Every day, and often every night, local miners descend into it to harvest the solid yellow sulfur that's deposited when the blue flames cool and extinguish. They break the sulfur apart with iron bars and load it into wicker baskets, which they then carry on their backs up the steep crater wall, and then 3 kilometers further to a weighing station where they get paid. Each basket weighs between 80 and 100 kilograms. The miners make this journey twice a day, navigating the same toxic crater that tourists navigate for a single night with gas masks. They're paid approximately 6 US cents per kilogram of sulfur extracted, and long-term exposure to these gases causes serious respiratory damage, and the work is largely unregulated. The tourists who hike to the crater at midnight to watch the blue fire, and the miners who carry 90 kilograms of sulfur out of it by dawn share the same ground. So both groups have to wear masks, and both groups are breathing the same air. One's there for a few hours to witness something extraordinary. The other's there because it's the available work and it's a paycheck. Kawa-i-gen is beautiful and brutal. It's science and it's exploitation. It's a place where the Earth does something genuinely, verifiably unprecedented in its spectacle. And that spectacle is also the daily working environment for people carrying 100 kilograms on their backs in toxic air for 6 cents a kilo. Let that sink in.